Welcome to Nightmare Fuel Stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the stories. Number ECHOES in the deep. The first time I heard the tapping, I was 3 weeks into my rotation aboard the USS Hades, a Virginia-class nuclear submarine patrolling the North Atlantic. It was 200 hours and I was alone in the sonar room, my headphones pressed tightly against my ears as I monitored the underwater soundscape. The rhythmic tapping came through faintly at first, so faint I thought it might be equipment feedback or perhaps my own pulse in my ears. Tap, 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 a pause, then again, tap, 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 tap. I adjusted my equipment, ran diagnostics, nothing unusual showed on the readouts. The submarine was running silent, 700 feet below the surface. We were in a dead zone, no vessel traffic for at least 50 nautical miles in any direction, yet the tapping continued. I should have reported it immediately. That's protocol, but something about the pattern seemed deliberate. Almost like Morse code, but not quite. I recorded a sample and ran it through our signal analysis system. No match found. By the time Lieutenant Commander Hayes relieved me at 600, the tapping had stopped. I mentioned it casually and he nodded, distracted by the shift change procedures. Probably just thermal expansion in the hull, he said, not looking up from the logs. These old girls talk to us sometimes, Freeman. You'll get used to it, I nodded, though the Hades was barely 5 years old, hardly an old girl. But I was the new guy, only 2 years out of the Naval Academy. Who was I to question Hayes with his 15 years of experience? That night I dreamed of the ocean, not the surface with its whitecaps and horizons, but the crushing, absolute darkness of the deep. In my dream, I was outside the submarine, floating in the black void without equipment, yet somehow breathing, somehow seeing. And in that impossible darkness, I could make out shapes moving, vast, undulating forms that seemed to defy classification. Not fish, not mammals, something else entirely. I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart hammering in my chest. The clock read 147. Tap, 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 tap. I sat bolt upright in my bunk. The sound wasn't coming through headphones this time. It was coming through the hull itself, from somewhere outside my quarters. I pulled on my uniform and stepped into the narrow corridor, listening. Silence. Maybe I'd imagined it. Stress and isolation play tricks on the mind during long deployments. I was about to return to my bunk when I noticed Chief Petty Officer Mercer standing at the end of the corridor, staring at me. He was completely still, his face expressionless in the dim red lighting. "Chief," I called softly. He didn't respond, just kept staring. Then slowly he turned and walked away, disappearing around the corner. I followed, my bare feet silent on the cold metal floor. When I reached the junction, I looked both ways. The corridor was empty. The next morning I sought out Mercer in the mess hall. He was sitting alone, methodically eating his breakfast. I sat across from him, my coffee mug clutched between my hands. "Chief, were you up walking around at about 200 last night?" Mercer looked up, his weathered face betraying nothing. "No, sir. I was in my bunk from 220 to 600. Are you sure?" "I could have sworn I saw you outside my quarters." A flicker of something, anxiety, crossed his face. "Must have been someone else, sir, or maybe you were half asleep." I nodded, unconvinced but unwilling to push further. "Right. Probably." Mercer hesitated, then leaned forward slightly. "Sir, if I may, how long have you been on submarines?" "This is my second deployment. First was on the Colorado." He nodded slowly. "The deep can mess with your head, sir. Especially when we're running silent like this. No natural light, recycled air, the pressure. It affects people differently." "I'm fine, Chief." "Of course, sir." He went back to his breakfast, but added quietly, "Just remember, what happens on the boat stays on the boat." That struck me as an odd thing to say. It wasn't like we were on some Vegas bender. We were on a military vessel with strict protocols and chain of command. But before I could ask what he meant, Captain Hollister's voice came over the intercom, calling all officers to the command center. I arrived to find the captain standing over the navigation console, his face grim. Commander Wallace, our XO, stood beside him, looking equally troubled. "Gentlemen," Hollister began once we were all present, "we've received new orders. We're to divert from our patrol route and proceed to these coordinates." He indicated a point on the digital map, somewhere in the mid-Atlantic, far from our current position and any known shipping lanes. "What's there, sir?" asked Lieutenant Reeves, our weapons officer. "According to naval intelligence, there's been unusual sonar activity in the area, possibly a new type of Russian drone submarine. We're to investigate, observe, and report back. No engagement unless absolutely necessary." I glanced at the coordinates again. We were being sent to the middle of nowhere, thousands of feet above an abyssal plain. It didn't make sense for the Russians to be testing anything there, too far from their support bases, too easy to be spotted by satellite. "Sir," I ventured, "those coordinates. They're near the mid-Atlantic ridge, aren't they?" Hollister's eyes narrowed slightly. "Your point, Lieutenant Freeman, just that it's an unusual location for Russian activity." The underwater topography there is complex, lots of thermal vents, magnetic anomalies. Thank you for the geography lesson, Hollister cut me off. Naval intelligence doesn't share their reasoning with junior officers. We have our orders. I fell silent, properly chastised, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about this mission. As we filed out of the command center, Commander Wallace pulled me aside. Freeman, you've been monitoring sonar. Anything unusual in the past 48 hours? I hesitated, thinking about the tapping. Sir, I did pick up some anomalous sounds during my watch. Rhythmic tapping, almost like code, but not matching any known pattern. Wallace's expression didn't change, but I noticed his posture stiffened slightly. Did you log it? I recorded a sample and ran it through analysis. No matches, and you reported this to Lieutenant Commander Hayes? Yes, sir. He thought it was just the hull expanding. Wallace nodded slowly. That's the most likely explanation. But from now on, I want any anomalous sounds reported directly to me, regardless of how insignificant they seem. Understood? Yes, sir. As he walked away, I couldn't help but feel that Wallace knew something he wasn't sharing. The submarine suddenly felt smaller, more confined than before. That night, the tapping returned. This time, I was ready. I'd rigged a makeshift recording system in my quarters, using equipment borrowed from the sonar room. As soon as the sound started, I began recording. Tap, 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 3 minutes of the same pattern, then silence. I played it back, listening carefully. There was something almost familiar about it, like a half-remembered song from childhood. On impulse, I ran it through a spectrogram analysis on my tablet. What I saw made my blood run cold. The tapping, when visualized, didn't form random patterns. It formed shapes, curves, and lines that, when viewed as a whole, resembled a face. A distorted, elongated human face with hollow eyes and a gaping mouth. I stared at the image, my mind refusing to accept what I was seeing. This couldn't be coincidence. Someone or something was sending us a message. A soft knock at my door made me jump. I quickly closed the tablet and shoved it under my pillow. Come in, I called, trying to keep my voice steady. The door slid open to reveal Petty Officer Chen, one of our sonar technicians. She looked pale, her usual confident demeanor replaced by something approaching fear. Sir, I'm sorry to disturb you, but... She hesitated, glancing nervously down the corridor. Can I come in? I nodded and she stepped inside, closing the door behind her. It's about the sounds, she said quietly. The tapping, you've heard it too, haven't you? I studied her face for a moment, weighing my response. What makes you think I've heard anything? Because you've been acting strange since it started, and because, she took a deep breath, because I saw what you recorded, the pattern, the face. My heart skipped a beat. You've seen it too, she nodded. 3 nights ago, I thought I was going crazy, but then I saw your analysis on the system before you deleted it. Chen, what do you think it is? She sat down on the edge of my bunk, her voice dropping to a whisper. I don't know, but I do know that we're not the first submarine to hear it. My cousin served on the USS Michigan 2 years ago. They were in these same waters, and he told me. He told me they heard things, saw things. Half the crew reported hallucinations by the end of the patrol. What kind of hallucinations? People who weren't there. Voices coming from empty rooms, and tapping, always the tapping. I felt a chill run down my spine. What happened to the Michigan? Chen looked away. Officially, nothing. They completed their patrol and returned to base, but my cousin, he wasn't the same afterward. He left the Navy 6 months later. Wouldn't talk about what happened, just said he couldn't go back into the deep. Before I could respond, the submarine suddenly lurched to one side, throwing us both against the wall. The emergency klaxon began blaring, and Captain Hollister's voice came over the intercom. All hands to stations. This is not a drill. Repeat, all hands to stations. Chen and I exchanged a look of alarm before rushing out into the corridor, which was now filled with crew members hurrying to their posts. I made my way to the sonar room, where Hayes was already at the console, his face illuminated by the blue glow of the screens. What's happening? I asked, taking my position. We've detected a large object moving toward us at high speed, Hayes replied, his voice tense. No acoustic signature matching any known vessel or marine life. I put on my headphones and immediately heard it, a low, pulsating hum that seemed to vibrate through my very bones. It was unlike anything I'd ever encountered, neither mechanical nor biological, but somehow aware. What the hell is that? I whispered. Hayes shook his head. I don't know, but it's big. Really big. On the screen, a massive shape was moving toward us, its outline blurry and indistinct. It seemed to change form as it approached, stretching and contracting like something not bound by the normal laws of physics. The intercom crackled and Commander Wallace's voice came through. Sonar, give me a classification on the contact. Hayes pressed the response button. Unable to classify, sir. It's not matching any known profile. A pause, then. Is it a submarine, whale? What are we dealing with? Hayes looked at me, his expression one of barely contained panic. Sir, I don't know what it is, but it's accelerating toward us, current speed approximately 50 knots. 50 knots. Nothing that large should be able to move that fast underwater. The laws of hydrodynamics simply wouldn't allow it. Evasive maneuvers, came Hollister's voice, take us deeper. The submarine tilted downward, and I felt the familiar sensation of my ears popping as we descended rapidly. The pressure gauge showed we were passing 900 feet, 1,000, 1,200. Contact is still pursuing, Hayes reported, his voice cracking slightly. Still accelerating, 1,500 feet. We were approaching our crushed depth. Any deeper and the pressure would begin to compromise the hull integrity. Sir, Hayes called into the intercom, recommend we level off. We're approaching, I know our limits, Lieutenant Commander, Hollister snapped. Continue descent, 18,000 feet. Warning lights began flashing on the engineering console. The hum in my headphones was growing louder, more insistent. And beneath it I could hear the tapping again. Tap, 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 but this time it wasn't coming through the hydrophones. It was coming from inside the submarine, from the hull all around us, as if thousands of tiny fingers were drumming on the metal. Captain, Wallace's voice came over the intercom. Engineering reports stress fractures beginning to form in sections 3 and 4. We need to ascend. A long pause, then, very well. Take us up to 1,000 feet. As the submarine began to level off and then rise, the tapping suddenly stopped. The hum faded. On the sonar display, the mysterious contact slowed, then seemed to dissolve, breaking apart into smaller fragments that scattered in all directions before disappearing entirely. Contact lost, Hayes reported, relief evident in his voice. I removed my headphones, my hands shaking slightly. What was that? Hayes shook his head, wiping sweat from his brow. I don't know. And I'm not sure I want to know. The next 12 hours were tense but uneventful. We maintained our depth at 1,000 feet, proceeding cautiously toward the coordinates naval intelligence had provided. The mysterious contact didn't reappear, but I noticed the crew was on edge, speaking in hushed tones and casting nervous glances at the surrounding hull. I was off duty, trying to get some sleep, when Chen appeared at my door again. Sir, you need to see this, she said, holding out a tablet. I took it from her and looked at the screen. It showed a classified naval document, partially redacted but still legible. The header read, Operation Deep Sound. Encounter reports 1962-2018. Where did you get this? I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. I have a friend in naval intelligence. When I told her where we were headed, she sent me this. It's not supposed to exist. I scrolled through the document. It detailed a series of encounters between U.S. submarines and unidentified underwater phenomena, all centered around the same region of the mid-Atlantic ridge we were now approaching. The reports described sonar contacts with impossible speeds and maneuverability, unexplained acoustic signatures, and most disturbingly, psychological effects on crew members. Hallucinations, paranoia, suicidal ideation, I read aloud. Crew members reporting visions of figures outside the submarine, tapping sounds communicating in unknown patterns. One passage in particular caught my eye. USS Scorpion, 1968 final transmission reported they're inside the boat before all contact was lost. Wreckage discovered 5 months later showed evidence of catastrophic implosion, but several compartments appeared to have been breached from the inside out. The USS Scorpion. One of the submarines the Navy had officially listed as lost due to mechanical failure. Chen, this is, I couldn't find the words. I know, she said quietly, and there's more. Look at the coordinates of these incidents. I examined the list more carefully. Each encounter had occurred within a 200-mile radius of the exact spot we were now headed toward. We're being sent right into the middle of it, I whispered. But why? Chen took the tablet back, her expression grim. The last few pages suggest they've been studying whatever this is for decades. They think it's intelligent. Trying to communicate, and we're what, bait, she shrugged, or messengers. The tapping, it's getting more complex, like it's learning our language. Before I could respond, the submarine lurched again, more violently this time. The lights flickered, then went out completely, leaving us in darkness for several seconds before the emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in a dim red glow. The intercom remained silent. No alarms, no orders. That's not good, I said, moving toward the door. We should get to our stations. The corridor outside was eerily empty. No crew members rushing to their posts, no officers shouting orders. Just silence, broken only by the faint hum of the emergency generators. We made our way toward the command center, the red emergency lights casting long, distorted shadows on the walls. As we passed the crew quarters, I noticed something strange. Several doors were open, the bunks empty. Where is everyone? Chen whispered. I shook my head, a sense of dread building in my chest. We reached the command center to find it nearly deserted. Only Commander Wallace was there, standing rigid before the main view screen, which showed nothing but static. Commander, I called. He didn't respond, didn't move. Just kept staring at the screen. I approached cautiously, Chen close behind me. "Commander Wallace, sir, what's happening? Where's the captain?" When he finally turned to face us, I had to stifle a gasp. Wallace's eyes were completely black, not just the irises, but the entire visible surface, as if filled with ink. His face was expressionless, almost waxy. "They're coming aboard," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. "They want to meet us, to understand us." "Who's coming aboard?" I demanded, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Sir, we're hundreds of feet underwater. Nobody can come aboard." A thin smile spread across Wallace's face, too wide, stretching further than seemed humanly possible. "They don't need doors, Lieutenant. They don't need air. They've been down here longer than we've walked on land." Chen grabbed my arm, her fingers digging painfully into my flesh. "Sir," she whispered urgently, "look at the depth gauge." I glanced at the instrument panel. The depth gauge read 32.0 feet. Impossible. Our crushed depth was around 18.0 feet. At 32.0, the pressure should have collapsed the hull like an empty soda can. "That can't be right," I muttered. "The instruments must be malfunctioning." "Are they?" Wallace asked, that inhuman smile still fixed on his face. "Or perhaps we've been modified, adapted. They're very good at that, you know. They've had so much practice." "Commander, you're not making sense," I said, trying to sound authoritative despite the fear coursing through me. "We need to find the captain, assess the damage." "The captain is with them," Wallace interrupted. "As is most of the crew. Only a few of you remain, unchanged, for now." A low, rhythmic tapping began to echo through the command center. Not from the hull this time, but from the corridors beyond, getting louder, closer. "Tap, tap, tap, tap. What do they want?" Chen asked, her voice barely audible. Wallace's smile widened even further, the corners of his mouth now extending almost to his ears in a grotesque parody of human expression. "To share," he said simply, "to merge, to become something new, neither them nor us, but both." The tapping was just outside the command center now, a cacophony of rhythms that somehow formed a harmonious whole, like a complex piece of music composed of nothing but percussion. "Run," I whispered to Chen. "Now." We bolted for the far exit, not looking back as Wallace began to laugh, a sound like water rushing through pipes. The door to the corridor slid open as we approached, and we sprinted through, heading for the engine room. If we could reach it, maybe we could initiate an emergency surfacing procedure. The corridors were transforming as we ran. The metal walls seemed to pulse and ripple, as if they had become liquid while somehow maintaining their solid form. The red emergency lights created nightmarish shadows that moved independently of anything physical. We turned a corner and froze. Blocking our path was a group of crew members. At least, they had once been crew members. Now they stood motionless, their eyes black like Wallace's, their skin glistening with a thin layer of what looked like mucus. Behind them, the corridor wall had opened somehow. Not torn or broken, but peeled away like living tissue, revealing a pulsating darkness beyond. And in that darkness, something moved, many somethings, forms that shifted and flowed, never settling into any recognizable shape. They seemed to be composed of the darkness itself, yet somehow more solid, more real than anything around them. One of the transformed crew members, I recognized him as Chief Petty Officer Mercer, stepped forward. His movements were fluid, almost graceful, but wrong, as if his joints worked differently now. "Join us, Lieutenant Freeman," he said, his voice bubbling as if speaking through liquid. "It doesn't hurt, quite the opposite, it's transcendent." Chen tugged at my arm, pulling me back the way we had come. "There's another way to the engine room," she hissed, "through the maintenance tunnels." We turned and ran again, hearing the wet slapping of footsteps behind us. The maintenance access was a small hatch near the mess hall, easy to miss if you didn't know it was there. Chen pulled it open, and we squeezed inside, pulling the hatch shut behind us. The tunnel was narrow, barely wide enough for one person to crawl through. Pipes and conduits ran along its length, carrying power, water, and air throughout the submarine. We moved as quickly as we could, the metal cold beneath our hands and knees. "What's happening?" I whispered as we crawled. "What are those things?" Chen didn't answer immediately, focused on navigating the maze of tunnels. Finally, she said, I think they're what lives down here, in the deep, and I think we've been encroaching on their territory for decades with our submarines and our sonar. But what do they want with us? Maybe they're curious. Maybe they're afraid, or maybe," she paused, "maybe they're lonely." The thought was somehow more terrifying than if she'd suggested they wanted to eat us. The idea of ancient alien intelligences, dwelling in the crushing darkness of the ocean floor, reaching out across the evolutionary gulf to touch us. To change us, we reached another hatch, this one leading into the engine room. Chen pressed her ear against it, listening. "I don't hear anything," she whispered. "But that doesn't mean it's safe," I nodded. "We don't have much choice. If we can initiate an emergency surfacing." "And then what?" she interrupted. "We're miles from anywhere, no way to call for help, and who knows how many of the crew have been changed." She was right. Even if we managed to surface, we'd be trapped on a submarine with creatures that could apparently transform humans into something else entirely. but staying down here, continuing toward those coordinates. One problem at a time, I said. First, let's see if we can even get to the controls. Chen nodded and slowly opened the hatch. The engine room beyond was dimly lit by the same red emergency lighting as the rest of the submarine. It appeared empty, the massive nuclear propulsion system humming quietly. We climbed out of the maintenance tunnel and moved cautiously toward the control panel. Everything seemed normal, gauges reading expected values, systems functioning within parameters. Except for the depth gauge, which still showed us at over 3,000 feet. "This can't be right," I muttered, tapping the gauge. "We should be crushed." "Unless we're not where we think we are," Chen said quietly. I looked at her. "What do you mean, what if we're not in the submarine anymore? What if this is all in our minds? Or what if we've been taken somewhere else entirely?" Before I could respond, a voice spoke from behind us. "Both incorrect and yet closer to the truth than you might imagine." We spun around. Captain Hollister stood there, his uniform immaculate, his posture rigid as always, but his eyes were like Wallace's, completely black. "Captain," I began, but he raised a hand, silencing me. "The vessel you know as the USS Hades still exists, Lieutenant. It is currently at a depth of 1,100 feet, continuing on its assigned course. The crew is performing their duties, including you and Petty Officer Chen." I shook my head, confused. "I don't understand." "You are here and you are there," Hollister said, as if that explained everything. "A part of you has been extracted, duplicated, so that we might communicate more directly." "We?" Chen asked. Hollister smiled, that same too-wide smile Wallace had shown. "We have been trying to speak to your kind for a very long time. The tapping was our first attempt, then we tried to show you images, patterns your minds could comprehend, but you weren't ready, your fear was too great." "What are you?" I demanded. "We are the depth," Hollister replied simply. "We have existed in the darkness between the continental shelves since your world was young. We have watched your evolution with interest. Your descent into our realm is recent, a mere eye blink in our existence, but significant. And what do you want from us?" Chen's voice was steadier than I expected. "Understanding, exchange, symbiosis." Hollister's black eyes seemed to absorb the light around them. "Your bodies are fragile, but your minds have potential. We can offer you transformation. Adaptation to our world. You want to turn us into those things we saw in the corridor," I said, disgust evident in my voice. "Those were merely first attempts, imperfect mergers. What we offer you is something far more profound, a true union of your consciousness with ours." As he spoke, the engine room began to change. The walls became translucent, then transparent, revealing the vast darkness of the ocean beyond. But it wasn't empty darkness. It was filled with moving shapes, colossal forms that dwarfed our submarine, undulating through the water with impossible grace. They were like nothing I had ever seen or imagined, not quite solid, not quite liquid, their bodies shifting between states of matter as they moved. And they were beautiful, terrifying, alien, but beautiful in a way that made my heart ache. "This is what you really are," I whispered. Hollister, or whatever was using his form, nodded. "One aspect, we have many, and our submarine. Our mission, was any of it real? All of it. Your government has suspected our existence for decades. The coordinates you were sent to it is a place where the boundary between your world and ours is thin. They hope to establish contact." "They knew?" Chen asked, incredulous. "Some suspected, none knew for certain until now." I looked at Chen, then back at the Hollister thing. "If we refuse your offer, what happens to us?" "You return to your vessel, to your lives, with no memory of this encounter. And if we accept," the Hollister thing's smile softened, becoming almost gentle, "you become more than you are. You join a consciousness older than your species. You will know the secrets of the deep, the songs of creatures you've never imagined. You will never die, never age, but you will no longer be human." Chen stepped forward, her expression resolute. "I accept." I stared at her in shock. "Chen, you can't be serious." She turned to me and I saw tears in her eyes. "All my life I've felt disconnected, like I was meant for something else. Something more." She gestured toward the vast shapes moving beyond the transparent walls. "This is it. This is what I've been waiting for. Chen, please." But she had already turned back to the Hollister thing, which extended a hand toward her. As she took it, her body began to change, not in the grotesque way we had seen with the crew members in the corridor, but subtly, beautifully. Her skin took on a luminescent quality, and her eyes darkened, not to solid black but to a deep, star-filled blue, as if they contained entire galaxies. She looked back at me one last time. "It's your choice, Lieutenant, but it's not what you fear. It's wonderful." Then she was gone, dissolved into mist that flowed out through the now permeable walls, joining the vast shapes beyond. The Hollister thing turned its gaze to me. "And you, Lieutenant Freeman, what is your choice?" I stood there, my mind racing. Part of me was terrified, desperate to return to the familiar world above. But another part, a part I hadn't known existed until this moment, was curious, tempted. What would it be like to join that ancient consciousness, to experience existence in a form so alien, so vast? To know the deepest secrets of the ocean, to move through the crushing depths as easily as through air. But I thought of my family on the surface, my mother who had already lost my father to the sea, my sister just starting college. The life I had built, the future I had planned. I can't, I said finally. I'm sorry, but I can't. The Hollister thing nodded, showing no disappointment. As you wish, perhaps another time. The invitation remains open. It raised a hand, and the world around me began to dissolve, the engine room fading back to solid walls, the transparent view of the ocean disappearing. The last thing I saw was that vast consciousness, those ancient beings, continuing their eternal dance in the deep. Remember, the Hollister thing's voice echoed as everything went dark. What happens in the deep stays in the deep. I woke in my bunk, drenched in sweat. For a moment I was disoriented, unsure of what was real and what had been a dream. The clock read 600 time for my shift. As I made my way to the sonar room, everything seemed normal. Crew members nodded greetings, the submarine hummed with its usual mechanical efficiency. No sign of the horror I thought I had experienced. Lieutenant Commander Hayes was waiting to be relieved, looking tired but otherwise normal, his eyes reassuringly human. "Anything to report?" I asked casually as I took my station. "All quiet," he replied. "We should reach the coordinates in about 6 hours." I nodded, putting on my headphones. The underwater soundscape was as expected, the low hum of our own engines, the distant calls of marine life, the eternal background noise of the ocean itself. No tapping. I began to relax. It had all been a dream then. A nightmare born of isolation and pressure and too many late-night horror movies before deployment. Then I noticed something on the duty roster. Petty Officer Chen was listed as medical leave transferred to surface vessel. "Hayes," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What happened to Chen?" He glanced up, frowning slightly. "Some kind of medical issue. Captain had her evacuated yesterday via the emergency pod. Didn't you know? I thought you two were friends." My blood ran cold. "Yeah, we are. What kind of medical issue?" Hayes shrugged. "Don't know the details. Something about her skin, I think. Doc Mercer said it was unlike anything he'd seen before." I turned back to my console, my hands shaking slightly. It couldn't be real. It couldn't. Then, faintly through my headphones, I heard it tap. Tap, 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 but this time the pattern was different, more complex, and somehow, impossibly, I understood it. "Hello, Lieutenant Freeman. She's happy here. You would be too." I ripped the headphones off, my heart pounding. When I looked up, Hayes was staring at me, concerned. "You okay, Freeman? You look like you've seen a ghost." I forced a smile. "Just tired. I didn't sleep well." He nodded sympathetically. "The deep does that sometimes. Don't worry, we'll be back on the surface before you know it." But as I put the headphones back on, carefully avoiding the sonar feed, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever was down there in the crushing darkness of the ocean floor, it was patient. It had existed for millions of years before humans first took to the sea, and it would exist for millions more after we were gone. And it would be waiting for me the next time I ventured into the deep, because some invitations never expire, and some choices, once offered, can never truly be declined. What happens in the deep stays in the deep until the deep decides otherwise.